4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050, WTKA online at WTKA.com. Here on Sports Talk 1050, Sam Webb, Ira Weintraub on the other side, and of course, the MGoBlog crew. Always great to catch up with the fellas to talk about the latest and the greatest Michigan football and beyond. But right now it's football season, and the season really began last week. That's what we're going to get into with the crew, the guys from MGoBlog, starting with the man that started it all over there in the blogosphere, if you will, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Hello, I haven't heard that term in a long time.
The MGoBlogosphere.
Yeah.
And Seth Fisher. Seth, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. We should bring back a lot of the old comments from like 2006 blogging.
No.
And then Seth Fisher. Seth, how are you? Then Craig Ross. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I would commend listeners to a lot of things this week, but I mean your work, Sam, with Vance and Al and Devin Gardner, all incredible stuff. Seth's UFR is great, but Brian wrote an article this week that is so brilliant and so clever. One of his lines was, "Take away the Mona Lisa and the Louvre is just a collection of guys in silly hats." And I thought, and this was a pretty thought-provoking thing for me, because I began to think of Ferentz and Iowa as not coaches, but sort of curators of the most boring offense ever created. And as the Mona Lisa is the most boring painting ever done, so too the Iowa offense. And so thank you, Brian, for getting that in my head. He's not a coach, he's a curator.
Normally some of your analogies or setups, they lose me sometimes, Craig. But this
They
one,
lose me too.
this one, it does feel like you actually have to be in. You have to really look for the components for an offense this anemic, right? Like you gotta try to be this bad almost. They're so terrible offensively, which we'll get to coming up. Let's start off first, Brian, with your takeaways from the matchup with Maryland. Starting on let's do the offense first. We'll come back to the defense. So your offensive takeaways from the 34-27 victory over the Terps.
Well, I mean, everybody's talking about JJ, and like his game has been analyzed to death. I just want to talk about the tight ends, really. Like Michigan had, I think, 10 snaps with 3 tight ends on the field. I think a majority of their snaps that weren't in passing downs had at least 2. And most of Michigan's successful run plays went off tackle behind those tight ends. And Maryland really couldn't change their defense away from a 4-2-5. They didn't have the personnel. And so you have this like 175-pound freshman trying to take on Bredesen and Schoonmaker. I'm never going to. And it really just opened things up for Blake Corum. And so even without Eric All, Michigan put 3 tight ends on the field and it worked. So that's a takeaway that I think is going to be serving Michigan well going forward. Because if you meet a team like this, you can do that. And if you meet a team that is pretty stout up front, you can spread them out.
So Harbaugh's obsession with tight ends, which I think was criticized some in the past, really maybe makes a lot of sense. I mean, it does to me.
Whether it makes sense or not, Harbaugh's going to keep doing it. So
it did seem a little ridiculous when you looked at the roster, and if you're like, okay, we got 1 tight end on the field, and like, the amount of tight ends that they have that are usable, like, they can go down to. They can go 3 more deep probably than the guys that Brian was just talking about. But like if they're going to be able to play 3 tight ends all the time, then yeah, you do need a depth chart that looks like that. And
this is probably going to be an outlier, right? This is not. This is probably the most tight end heavy game of the season. But when it was time to put them on the field, that worked out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it's interesting though that they also, they dip into walk-ons for their tight ends as well, and that's a position where like historically you can find that kind of talent. So it's expanding the abilities of the roster beyond what the 85 scholarship limit even should allow you to get. And Maryland, their only answer was just to play entirely to spill, right? Like everything is dive inside, let the next guy handle it, dive inside, let the next guy handle it. And ultimately you end up with Blake Corum against Jacorian Bennett, who's a cornerback, and that's how you get the Corum game, right?
Yeah, it was very, very astute observation, as is the norm, Brian. I really showed up on that last touchdown drive, and
Yeah,
they ran the
mean-
same play. They ran a variation of the same play 5 straight times.
well, and what it reminded me of is there's an Ohio State game that we played where J.K. Dobbins was just getting outside, getting
Same play.
20-yard chunks every time,
Same
and that's
play.
because you're running duo, and the defense is panicking about the fact that they're going to give up 5 yards if you just drive those defensive tackles off the ball. They pop inside, and then you need to back with the vision to get outside, which Corum did on the last touchdown. So, yeah, and especially when you're putting 3 tight ends out there and you're adding extra gaps for the people on defense to account for, it's just, I mean, people sort of lose their minds when they're put under that kind of pressure. Now, that's not something that you're going to be able to do every down. I don't know if they ran that play the rest of the game before that, maybe a couple times, but it's kind of hard to distinguish between that and inside zone a lot of the time when you're charting it. But yeah, so if they have that in their package, and then they have a bunch of spread stuff that they've been working on but haven't really been putting on film, they're going to be able to attack the weak spots of any defense they come up against. Now, whether Iowa has one is an open question, but because they're the number 1 defense in SP plus in the country, not in the conference, and so you got to give them a lot of respect. But I feel like Michigan's going to be able to poke and then find whatever chinks in that armor exist.
Well, go ahead. Well, along those lines, I mean, they're going to probably play quarters, right? Quarters, half, something like that.
Iowa. Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, and I heard Vance Bedford said that what Michigan's going to need to do is motion a lot to the boundary and run stretch plays. I mean, does that feel right to you? I mean,
I haven't looked at the Iowa defense in detail yet. I mean,
look at the Mona Lisa.
Well, to me, trying to run stretch against Iowa is going to be real hard because they practice against that every day. They've been running the same zone scheme at Iowa since Hayden Fry was there. So Michigan doesn't run a lot of stretch, and you're going up against a defense that sees an absolute ton of it in practice. To me, I'm looking at more unusual gap schemes that might put a linebacker in a bad fit.
Yeah, what they couldn't do in the last game is they could not run counter to save their life against Iowa, one of their staple run plays. But what did work? Duo worked in a big way against Iowa. You get on your double teams right away. Now, Michigan, one of the things that I think you really saw in this game, and you kind of wonder, would it be as prevalent taking a play, running it from a lot of different looks or adding a wrinkle to it? So we saw them add a kick to their duo where they have a guy coming across to kick a guy out. We also in this game saw them add a counter to a duo, which again, that was another thing that threw Maryland for a loop. And maybe one of the most interesting ones, and I had to ask, was this opponent specific? Because we like to check our work. They ran a one back power with a tackle pulling instead of a guard. It's like, man, these dudes, you're starting to see some similar themes of creativity that might not go noticed to the common fan. But if you're watching, they're actually throwing a lot in there.
Yeah, they did that twice actually, the tackle power. And on the first one, that was a +2 from Schoonmaker, because what he did is he held up the edge guy and then he passed him off, because that tackle isn't going to get there in time unless he's got a little bit of help. And Schoonmaker basically ran a one-man double team on the end man on the line of scrimmage. So, and then he pops off on the linebacker, and I think he's been just excellent on the ground this year. And go ahead.
No, I just it's fascinating to me because I was watching the tape with David Nasternak, And when we saw the tackle pull, he said, "What the hell is that?" And I said, "I don't know what that is. It looks like power, but they're using the tackle." So I had no idea really what was going on, but it was, I thought, very
When you guys
interesting.
talk about the Louvre, what the Louvre is actually is a historical museum, and 90% of that museum people don't even go and see, but it's awesome. I'm gonna
Guys
stay
and
on the Louvre
silly,
here,
it's just
but
guys and
but
silly
it's just
hat.
a whole bunch of it's so much stuff from different historical time periods and stuff they've stolen because the French went everywhere and took everything from
But
wherever
it's
they
mostly guys in silly hats.
yeah, it's mostly good. But anyway, it's stuff out of. But if you go into the Bentley Library and you pull out some old film, you're going to see tackle pulls all the time. I mean, this is stuff right out of the Fritz Chrysler and Yost era. Like they would pull guys all over the place because they didn't have reads really. Like the idea of options didn't really come into play until the late 20th century. So they were always trying to figure out ways of getting, and like that's kind of what Michigan's offense is. They're a historical museum of all sorts of weird looks that people don't expect to see. Like that play that Brian's talking about, that's a great play by Schoonmaker, but it's also, that guy's not expecting the tight end to come off of him and then get popped by a tackle. Like the way the teams prepare, you wait and see, okay, is the guard pulling? If the guard pulls, I'm supposed to do this. Especially when you got young linebackers, you try to give them very simple jobs. Like if the tackle pulls, that's not in the list, right? Like there's they go into their system and like I don't know what to do with this. Like the tackle pulling, whose guy is that? Is that supposed to be the backside safety? Is that the nickel? Like that's it messes with everybody's keys.
Yeah, to me, adding a counter step to a duo is a brilliant move because you think if you're a defender, and I had to ask Al this because he is very, very adamant when we talk that duo and split zone are different. I understand that. When you add a counter step to a duo, it looks like a split zone. And I gotta think that defenses think the same thing, right? And so I just when you see some of the wrinkles that they're throwing in early,
it can be
it's
so
like, okay,
hard to tell.
Yeah.
Because so for people who aren't familiar, duo is basically you get two double teams on various members of the defensive line. And sometimes if you just crush that guy so quickly and put him to one side, then you release the second level anyway, and it just looks like inside zone. So it's, I hate it. as a person who charts games, I'm just like, oh, what is this? I don't know.
Well,
Sometimes it's
imagine
pretty
how
obvious.
defenses feel, right?
So, but one thing that I think we did see in this game a little bit more is Ryan Hayes being useful, not just as a puller, but at the point of attack. So he had a couple solid wins, and previous weeks, Michigan's ground game has been really right-handed. And I think developing your ability to run over the left side is going to be important just because people are going to start cheating to the Trente Jones Zinter side. So that was a development that I thought was good. And sometimes when Michigan's in pistol, they got to throw the ball. They ran the ball 100% of the time in pistol in this game. They threw it once against UConn from pistol. So they've got a really big self-scout that they need to get in place probably for this week. Because if you're running against Iowa and you're tipping, it's not going to go well.
It might be to set some up. I remember thinking just within the game last year when Iowa was blowing, from the very start of the game, they were all over. It was maybe the one the one thing that they had really snuffed out well all game for the most part was counter, and then Michigan ran a flea flicker off a counter and got a big play out of it. So it set up a big play, but man, they had to experience some pain on it ahead of time. So this particular self-scout maybe is setting up. Hey, yeah, we're gonna show them this look.
We did see a counter, not in this game, but before we saw them. So Iowa, what they were doing was bringing a guy up and in. All right, and that is a way that you can use your edges specifically to beat plays that are trying to run the counter and a couple other off tackle plays. You're specifically going against that play. And Michigan used a version of their arc read to mess with that guy and get JJ outside of that. And then they also have that split flow where they run the tight end into the flat while you're doing that. And that will work against that as well. So they have shown that last year. I don't even know if they had counters to what Iowa did before that game, but this year we've seen the specific counters to what they're doing there, so they can pull those out too. That's one of the kind of questions I had for Brian here, is that Michigan did a lot more under center, and that I appreciate it because it allows them to kind of get those blocks in faster, but it also takes away McCarthy's legs, which is one of the best threats the offense has.
Well, a lot of those under center plays were 3 tight end looks, and it's pretty hard to run zone read from a 3 tight end look because you just have this huge surface, and so like, who are you letting go? Where's the read coming from? It just gets it becomes more complicated for the quarterback, because when you have these traditional zone reads, maybe you have one tight end, you know where he's going, you know what the front's doing, and the ability to scrape or do something is more limited. And then when you put more guys in the box, there's more things the defense can do, and it just gets hairy. So I don't think I've ever seen a team go 3 tight ends from the gun, except on the goal line.
I mean, yeah, you're right. That's what it is. It's the belly look, right? Like they used to have that in the offense in like 2018.
So yeah, so it's just not something that I think teams have really explored. Now, if Michigan wants to do that, they probably could. Like, then you can start running some midline stuff, let defensive tackles go, and then they kind of tend to lose their minds. But we haven't seen any trap stuff this year yet. We didn't really see.
Iowa ran it. Iowa runs trap this year.
Yeah, no, but like, so that's something that we're probably going to start seeing in the playbook, because Jim Harbaugh loves a good trap, and he's got some guys who can run it this year, because he's got guys who can hit defensive tackles from the side and knock them over.
I don't know how. For both you guys,
one second.
Yeah.
Just because, as long as we're on this real quick, I don't know how well you remember like 2015 Rutgers or 2017 Rutgers, but I think it was 2017 Rutgers. It was one of them, but like they started running the backside of power. So they'd be pulling a guy, and then they would have, I think it was Higdon, kind of cutting back to the backside of that, because. And Maryland was doing the same thing. When they saw Polar, they would immediately just shift all their linebackers that way, and they were already slanting that way and then coming back in again. So
we didn't see any. I think that's called wineback when that's intentional. And I don't know if we've seen backs try to make that cut yet. I mean, we saw Stokes in the last game go off the backside, but most of the time it's been going to where you'd expect it to go so far. So we'll see.
My questions for you guys is, has Michigan run any midline zone in the past? I don't remember it. Now, maybe they have.
There have been a couple times. There were a couple times under Shea that they did run midline.
Okay.
But that didn't work that well. And I think we're going to see how complicated Michigan wants to get and who they want to get complicated with. So one thing that you might not want to put on JJ's plate is a bunch of zone read that is unfamiliar, because as Sam was talking about, like, he didn't recognize trap 2. So what do you want to spend time on him with?
Yeah.
You want to spend time on him with recognizing coverages or getting weird with the zone stuff? Probably coverages.
It leads me to another question I wanted you guys to speculate on, because I asked Devin this as a former quarterback. I asked Al this as a former play caller, because the fans were wondering, it's like, hey, man, why do you think there wasn't a ton of RPO in this game? They RPO'd some, but there wasn't a ton of it. Why do you guys speculate? Because I haven't actually asked anyone on the inside this question. So, this is total speculation, but I'm curious what you guys think about that element of the game plan not really being a huge element of the game plan.
Well, I think part of it was that they kind of lost a little faith in JJ's decision making, just in this one game context. So it's his first real game against a real opponent where he's the starter, and he starts kind of like having some questionable decisions. The first one, he's got a wheel route where there's a defensive end on Blake Corum. He doesn't throw that. And so maybe he's just in his head a little bit, and you get the RPO at the beginning of the second half where Isaiah Gash takes the ball and there's 2 guys wide open to convert the first down, and he doesn't pull that. And you're just kind of, so when your quarterback is kind of squirrely in that way, I think you move away from that in the playbook. And then the other thing is you can just crush them with Blake Corum. So Why make it complicated?
Right. It was funny. It was funny to see the reactions on Twitter. That why did they call a running play to Isaiah Gash? It was RPO.
I was really mad about that in the stands. I was like, what are we doing? And then I was still, what are we doing? Because you got a 4th and 2 on the plus side of the 50, and you got Blake Corum do what he's doing. You can't punt that ball, in my opinion, but it worked out.
If he executes that RPO, that's a first. I mean, Blake. I think it was Blake wide open in the flat. No, not Blake.
It was
but,
it was Henning
wide open in the flat. Yeah,
and then Johnson was also open on a hitch, so he had his choice of open guys for the first down.
I mean, do you guys think JJ had a poor game here? I mean, Pro Football Focus did. They graded him out very poorly. He made a lot of mistakes. He made some really good plays. I mean, it was an uneven game, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I don't think he played well. I think he played okay. I don't think it was poor, but I don't think he played well.
Yeah, the fun thing about it is that everybody's like, I didn't play that well. And then it was 18 to 26 for 220 yards.
Exactly.
So, that was a bad JJ game.
Wasn't there always, and this is the thing that baffles me, because, it was a game where he looked like it was his first start against a real team.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was, stat-wise, he was still decent. He was decent to, not on the low end of good. He made a key downfield throw at the end of the game. The touchdown to Roman was a brilliant throw. He had some really, really good throws in this game. There were some times where he saw some things he hadn't seen on tape, and there were some times where he tried to do too much, where you see what you see a lot of first-time starters do.
And I was weird. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was surprised just looking at Maryland's coverage. Like, I was expecting that there'd be a lot of guys running open on the plays where JJ was indecisive. And you talked about the tight end on trap 2 or whatever, but I felt like a lot of the time he really just didn't have a whole lot of places to go when he was stymied. And you got to give credit to Maryland, that the corner route that we mentioned, that was a bad decision. I mean, they managed to bracket. Michigan goes Max Pro. They bracket the 2 outside receivers, and then the other guy is covered too. So he doesn't really have a place to go with that ball, and he should make a better decision in that circumstance. But the better decision is just to throw it out of bounds. Yeah. And I was actually impressed with what Maryland was able to do in terms of putting people near receivers. Now, we saw against SMU that when you challenge those guys, they fall apart. And I was kind of like, well, where's Angelo Anthony in this game? I mean, if our quarterback is having kind of an issue, you can always just tell him to go high point a ball against Bennett, and he'll implode.
That's always been like the two things that MGoBlog is always up against in the Harbaugh era about with their offense. Number one, the backup quarterbacks seem to be 100% on pull reads, and starting quarterbacks are like 25% on pull reads for some dumb reason, and never be able to figure that one out. The other thing is they just don't YOLO, right? Like, we had this whole thing with Nico Collins, and now we got Angelo Anthony out there, and they want to get the guy open and throw it to the open guy. They never really just say, all right, look, go win this. Go, and they've got the dudes to do it, and it's annoying because these guys go to the NFL and then they do it in the NFL, and you're like, come on, man.
This situation is far less egregious than Nico. Please don't get me started on Nico.
Yeah, I felt bad for Andrell. He got open downfield on a couple of occasions and just got missed. And that's the other thing. Like, JJ is not. So I keep telling people, I mean, if this is your down game, if this is your growing pains game, you ought to be really excited.
Yeah, he's
not going to miss downfield shots like that. He's just not.
Yeah, he hits one more downfield shot, we're talking about a 10 yards per attempt game, and against a real team that has a veteran secondary and who covered pretty well. So, I mean, the problems were that the bad decisions were very bad, and the problems were very bad. So the corner route could have been picked easily. He fumbles on the quarterback draw, and then there's that Ishtar sojourn where he loses 15 yards in a sort of young Devin Gardner. Did that come up?
I made that too. I made that comparison too. And Devin never did that. It's like, oh, you got to be
You
kidding.
you
Remember the Notre
Northwestern
Dame game?
Like, come on, man. He
Or
never
what,
did
the
that for
Northwestern
Pocket.
game
Yes,
where he
yes,
like
he
chucked the ball to
did.
Roy Roundtree at the end after like running
Yeah.
around for 15
Yes, he
seconds. We put
did.
a whole
Stop
Betty
covering
Hill
up for
theme,
Devin.
and we got through like the whole first frame of it before he threw the ball on that. What,
Like, yes,
Michigan
he
State
did.
game where they
Come
put
on,
him in one
man.
time?
So, because part of it is, and this has to be the dilemma for Nick. Like, you gotta let a playmaker be a playmaker, right? And so that one where he runs around, he gets the first down. Like, okay, maybe he missed a read, but he's able to compensate for that with his legs. But then I think what you call it, Ishtar. I can't remember exactly what that reference was, but he had
A very
his
long movie.
yeah, his check down to Blake was open, but he had gotten into his
and
Ishtar.
it's 2nd and 10, right? Like
Yeah.
the check down, like the scramble, the crazy scramble is 3rd and 7. So just kind of like last week where he takes a sack on 3rd and 14 because he's not trying to pick up 6 yards on 3rd and 14. Sure, that risk ratio is good. 2nd and 10, close to the red zone, and you got to check down to Blake frickin' Corum. You got to check it down.
Yeah. And so I think he'll get. So let me say this about Jay. I know it might sound like it's a Pollyannish view of JJ. I just know the kid, and so stuff like that, like it's not just lip service, and he's like, man, I'm not gonna do that again. Like he is the type that will really go back in the lab, look at the film, stay after practice, go talk to defensive coaches. What are you doing here? What's the weakness here? He's that dude. So for him to go out and have a game where he's seeing some things for the first time, he's having some competition, adversity really for the first time. I think that every game that he has like that is actually a positive because by the time you get to the end of the year, he will have seen everything. I think he'll be ready.
Yeah, and well, I mean, we're going to see what happens this week. This is going to be fascinating. I mean, Michigan is probably going to have a real conservative game plan because they beat Rutgers by 2 scores because they scored 2 defensive touchdowns. So we're going to probably see something closer to last year in terms of relying on the quarterback. But what he's going to be able to do against a defense that is really, really good at confusing you and getting you to throw interceptions is going to be, I think, fascinating. Hopefully not nerve-wracking given the opposition offense. But I mean, if this was the number 60 offense in the country, this would be a bear of a game.
I just hope. Can Michigan just get up by 2 scores early in this game, please?
I mean, that's what they did in the Big Ten championship. That was the game plan, right? Like let's run a couple weird things, and they had that crazy run with Corum and McCarthy. And
then the next play is the double pass, and then it's game over.
Yeah,
and we got to talk about the attempted pass in this game from Bell. I was mad at Klatt because I'm in the stadium and I'm like trying to figure out what's going on, and then I'm watching and Klatt immediately is like, they have not run this before. They did not run the jet with Bell. So what are we doing here? Having a trick play that's based on the jet to Bell. So I am still double passes, 1 per game, flea flickers, 1 per game. We tried. That's good. We got to work on our sequencing, but that's fine. Keep doing it.
I still think they should have thrown it back to McCarthy on the transcontinental on that one. That was wide open.
that's tough because the guy's running away from McCarthy and he's a wide receiver. But
sure. Real quick on that play, the Ishtar sojourn that he had. I didn't know. Maybe you guys did, but that if you put the ball on the turf, but you're still standing up, it's not down. I always thought the ground can't cause a fumble, and that's a lie.
Well, the ball can touch down, and the play isn't dead as long as no body part is touched.
I mean,
down.
I didn't know that.
There was a famous play in Arkansas, Tennessee, 10 years ago with Clint Sterner, who put the ball on the ground and just kind of left it there accidentally. But anyway, that's kind of a weeds.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the offensive line play? I mean, I thought the pass pro was really good. I think there were only maybe 4 pressures in the entire game, and a couple of those I'm not sure were offensive line issues. The but PFF didn't grade the offensive line out particularly well, except for Trente Jones, who got a big grade. But beyond that, they were all below average. Al Hadi was below average. I don't know. That's what I wondered.
I don't. I do not
They're weird
understand.
this year. It's really hard to figure out what's going on at PFF.
Okay.
I do not understand their offensive line grading, just flat out. Like, I think they're a valuable resource in a lot of ways, but when I see how they grade OL, it doesn't match up with anything I do. And I'm a layman, but I've been doing this for a long time, and usually the grades correspond to NFL draft spots for me. So if it's corresponding for them, I'll be surprised.
I have some guesses, but speaking of offensive lines, Maryland's offensive line was way better than I gave them credit for going into the game. And I know I was not, I wasn't terrible about them, but they were, Jalen Duncan actually had some really good plays. They had some great pickups. And, I went into the defense side. I barely even talked about the defense, but I went into that thinking that, oh no, our guys are not going to be able to get pressure. And I thought I was going to see some really bad things. I did from a couple of the players, but a lot of times it was like Michigan was bringing interesting blitzes and they were picking up weird looks to the point where at one point they actually are looking for a guy and he's not there. Michigan had to mess with it, but it was a very high level meta game that I don't think I've seen played at the college level before between our pass rushes and their protections.
So let's pause here because it's a great breaking point. We can come back on the other side, talk Michigan defense coming out of that game. I think some questions were answered, and then some questions emerged, or maybe were emphasized in this game. We will get to that on the other side. More MGoBlog Roundtable here on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
I heard you printed out the Pearson thing, Craig.
Yeah, I did. Did you? I felt.
What did you guys think of that?
I haven't seen it
I felt
yet.
personally vindicated because I took a lot of heat for saying, well, maybe there's another side to this.
Well, of course he's going to have his story, but
he's going to have his story, and some parts of his story actually made sense and more sense than the things around it. Now, some parts of his story didn't make sense to me, and so to me, it's a much murkier situation than was presented, I feel, in the media and commentators.
It sounds like
always the case.
Yeah,
right?
he came out very, very pointedly at Steve Shields, and it sounds like he's saying Steve Shields sabotaged me.
Yeah,
that's
but
what
you know what? One
one
goalie coach is not going to have that much effect on the team. 1/3 of the team is not going to just turn on you because of one goalie coach.
I don't know, but I mean, for example, let's take the notion that was just hammered away at that. Well, he told the team to lie on their COVID forms. I think his commentary about that was pretty compelling, and that's probably BS. That he did not tell anyone any such thing, and that was a pretty major complaint that people hammered him on. Now, some of the other things, yes, okay. I mean, maybe the interviewer didn't do a good enough job, but I wanted to know, what's his name? I wanted to know how come Bancroft was allowed to sort of go, continue to go on.
He doesn't have an answer for it. So
when I read that article,
I said that's a guy who got the interview because he was going to tell Mel's side and Mel's side only. Well, and Mel does not have an answer for Bancroft. He doesn't have an answer for why he was not necessarily not truthful about things. And if Wilmer Hale in their report is saying we don't think this guy is being truthful with us, that means something to me. That means a lot more to me than his description of the events. And he didn't have an answer for either one of those things because he doesn't have an answer. And those
he did have an answer to the Bancroft thing. I just didn't find the answer completely compelling. And so
that's the same
but
thing.
It's not quite the same thing. And here's the difference between me and 99.9% of the world. I've been a neutral my whole career. I've listened to one side of cases. I've listened to the other side of cases. And sometimes you just don't know. And now the way the article fell down, from my point of view, is that they view this as a firing. And it wasn't really a firing. Michigan just didn't extend the contract. And I don't criticize that, given the fact there were problems in the program. And in the end, that's on Mel. Regardless of whose fault it was or how they happened or what the etiology of these problems were, he has to bear it. And there were problems there. And so I'm fine with the outcome. And I did attend Norado's presser this week, his Zoom presser, and he's interesting. And I think he may be a really good coach going forward. But but Mel's story isn't inert. It's
Well,
not
I'll
an
tell you.
inert
Let me
story.
give you my view, not being a hockey guy, just talking to Mel, reading the articles, and kind of talking to people around the athletic department. My sense is that Bancroft was a fixture in the program, that he was around, and that Mel wasn't moving out a fixture in the program. I don't know if that's the case, but it just feels like he was keeping a guy who had always been in the program. That's number one. Number two, you remember I asked you guys, why are all these guys, all these first round picks who could leave, why are they returning?
We're coming back on radio, guys.
So I just got the sense that you had a divide. I think that was the case, class-wise on the team. I think there were issues already there, and it sounds like when Steve Shields got fired, it does sound like that was an issue too. That he sort of
and by guys coming back on radio.
That's how it seemed. Just basically,
Sam, I think you're very close to the mark.
4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Before we get back to it, want to remind those of you who are in the market for a new vehicle to get on board with Brighton Ford. Great deals to be had out at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. That's where John Cuter and his crew will take great care of you. Great deals like the one on the 2022 Ford Bronco Sport Big Bend, $380 a month with $3,300 down, or $456 a month with $1,800 down. Or how about this, the 2022 Ford F-150 Super Crew, $414 a month with $2,000 down, or $478 a month with $500 down. And last but not least, the 2022 Ford Escape SE all-wheel drive, $355 a month with $2,000 down, or $418 a month with $500 down. For those and other great deals, get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD. Make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. Just real quick, couple of questions to close out the offense. Carl asks, is there truth to the mush rush comments? Guys, I think they mush rushed them some. I don't think that was the complete explanation. But I think at times, they were cautious about getting too far upfield with JJ. But I think the other piece of it was, make him decipher coverage with a lot of guys back, and that did work at times.
Yeah, so they're dropping 7 and 8 a lot of the time, and they're running a lot of zones. So those are situations in which you're probably not going to get a ton on a scramble. But also, Michigan was running a ton of vertical routes, right? Mm-hmm. So there were a ton of like 3 and 4 verts, and those guys lifted the coverage a lot. So when there's nobody on the screen for Maryland except maybe one linebacker, you do have to be careful as a defensive lineman.
All right, let's get over to the defense.
Thank you.
I went into this game wondering, could Michigan hold up in the secondary with the level of aggression that they shown in their pressure scheme? Can Michigan's guys across the board, not just your corners, but your nickel, your safety, can they hold up in man-to-man against some real dudes? And guys, that was impressive. That was impressive.
I was walking out of the stadium, and I get stuck behind a woman wearing the jersey that says Twins Mom, and then a couple of really, really tall guys who are a lot taller than whatever 6'2" that they're listed. And I'm like, Jamon, can you just not run my route for me too? Like, you ran everybody else's route today. And man, I'm going through the tape on those plays where like they were targeting him. And that was the thing. Like, we go into this game and you're saying these guys, this is the best group of receivers we're going to see until Ohio State. And Rakeem Jarrett is a 5-star. he's cooling his heels, and this is his contract year, and he's going to the NFL, and this was his opportunity to prove it. That guy, his longest catch of the day was, a perfect coverage by Usain still, and he just happens to bring it in. That's like a great play. That guy's going to the NFL. That's what you had to do if you wanted to get these passes off, if you wanted to come down with these against Michigan's corners today. Jamon Green, he knows what the coverages are, or he knows what the routes are, and he's hopping over it. So if you try to run a fade, he hops into your lane, and you're stuck. Turner's doing the same thing. He anticipates when the guy's break inside is going to be, and he just steps in the way. And that's it. Your route's dead right there. And like when they get targeted, there was one time where Turner got a little turned around, but the receiver was turned around too because Turner was in his chest and he might have given him a shove. I don't know what happened, but like that was really one of two times I think that there was really an open guy on the cornerbacks. The other one was Turner just didn't sink in cover 2, and I think that he figured that Michigan had a good pass rush on and they were going to throw to the outlet and didn't expect him to go over his head to the tight end. The guy actually ends up dropping it. That's the play where Tagovailoa got hurt, so it worked out. But like the coverage issues were not on the cornerbacks, and like tell me 2 years ago, you going against these receivers that you were not worried about these guys just getting absolutely toasted.
I've been on the Jamon Green train longer than you, sir.
Well, I'm a convert now.
So
he was great.
Go ahead, Craig.
No, just to say the corners were phenomenal, no question. I thought Sandersville was very good also, especially in coverage. Vance Bedford seems to think that Mike is as good a cover guy as Dax, maybe better. And that
better, I think, as good a cover. And let's be clear, he says
not
as a cover guy.
As a cover guy, right?
Well,
not as good as perhaps in
the box.
Blitz, in the box. But I thought he's pretty good there too. Go ahead, Brian.
We're talking about a converted wide receiver.
Yeah.
And on a critical 3rd and 7, Maryland's like, we're going to go at this guy with a wide receiver screen. And he whips that play.
Yeah.
And what we've seen from him is an uncommon level of physicality for a guy who was brought in mostly as a slot receiver. He's not been victimized on the edge maybe more than once this year. And I feel like if it didn't happen against Maryland, it's probably unlikely to happen for much of the year. So, yeah, he's not Dax Hill, because Dax Hill gave up 20 yards to Rakim Jarrett, not 12.
There were times where you saw just the newness to it was either newness to the position. They hit him with a there was a play action deal that they got over his head.
Yeah, the tight end on the second touchdown where it's one of those things where the tight end runs by him and you can see him go, "Oh no!"
Yeah, right. So they got him.
He tried to jump up and bat it out of the air, where he probably at that point just needs to mitigate damage and
run
after
I mean,
the tight end.
he was kind of close to that. So like,
yeah, but that was the thing. You saw. I'm like, I don't need to ream him out for this because he obviously recognized what happened there, and like that plays a scramble where like. There are a lot of times where if you're in the secondary, you're like sitting watching, you're like, oh, sweet, my guy's got a sack. Oh, no, right? Like, they are good at escaping. And it wasn't just Edwards, like, got out of some. There was one where, like, Mozzie Smith, like, has him just dead to rights, and the guy just, like, ducks his head and pops out. And then there's nobody else because everyone just. It was weird to see not just Tagovailoa, but Edwards be able to slip out of those two to the point where I might have some concern with Michigan finishing their pressures now.
Yeah, I want to see, before I say that's a problem, I want to see it, see if it persists. But I thought Mikey had a real good. The only time, you really saw guys running open for the most part was tempo situations where the call wasn't. That is going to be the piece, the component from an adjustment. And much like we saw last year against Michigan State, where you had them realize, okay, can't sub if they aren't subbing, right? That was an adjustment from McDonald coming from the pros. This one was communication against tempo, because the 4th down call in their final touchdown drive, obviously guys, the cover guys play side didn't get the call, and then on the touchdown, it was pretty clear. The linebackers, there was some assignment confusion on that as well. You wind up with a tight end running wide open in the end zone.
I was watching that one a bunch, and I ultimately just said, Mullings, just to go and do your job. But Mullings was correct that when they switched the backfield around like they did, that he and the middle linebacker always switched spots. This was the first time Mullings was out there with Barrett all game. So like it was the first time Colson wasn't one of the linebackers when Mullings was out there. I don't remember them switching putting those two guys next to each other, and I think that was part of it. That like Colson.
Well, I was told that some guys didn't get the call on that play, or didn't get the right call.
He gets, and there was a meta game going on with the subs, and Maryland prepped for this game. Loxley wanted this one bad.
Yeah,
they had a lot of two scripted drives.
Yeah, there was a lot of tempo in the first quarter where you get Cam Good locked on the field, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I think they did a reasonably good job until the fourth quarter on that final drive of actually contesting teams that are going up tempo. So I think that's progress. We saw a couple of instances of that in the first couple of games where opponents would go tempo and Michigan looked pretty prepped for it. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be better at it than we were under McDonald.
So, good question, guys.
Real quick, I wanted to get that in. That like they had guys coming in from weird spots. They had a bubble screen where they pulled the backside tackle and the guard and brought that around like that. That one surprised them because that was the one where Samerstill comes up, tries to set the edge, and and got sat on. Legal block, but like that he's out, he's set the edge, and then Colson's supposed to come and get him, and then all of a sudden Colson's dealing with not one but two pullers. So they just had like a lot of weird stuff that I think Maryland had prepped specifically for this game.
So the inability to get pressure with four. If I go into this game saying I wonder can the corners hold, can the cover guys hold up a man-to-man against some dudes and get an answer to that, I come out of it wondering, can Michigan get pressure with four consistently? I think that is a legitimate question coming out of this game. What do you guys think?
I think it's been answered. I mean, I think the answer is no. And now maybe they can change personnel if they play maybe with Oki or more Braden McGregor. They may be, but I don't think they're going to get organic pressure this year. Not, I don't know.
Well, they got a little bit from Mike Morris. I think that's going to be consistent. Yeah. Like he's going to get, I think he had 6 pressures in this game, and I think that's about what you're going to get. You're going to get a decent level from him. I think one of the disappointing things is we really haven't seen a whole lot from the defensive tackles in this department. So I was hoping that we might get some sort of Mo Hurst / Ryan Glasgow defensive tackle where he's pretty relevant in the game, and mostly they're pushing the pocket, and that's fine as far as it goes, but it's not generating pressures by itself. So that can be helpful if someone else generates a pressure. And then
Michigan's
and then the weak side end, it's just like Jalen Harrell had a great 3 weeks against teams that are not really Power 5 level, and I think he kind of came back down to earth in this one. So you're looking for a solution at that weak side end, and you have a couple of options. You have Oki, you have McGregor, and you have Moore. One of those guys might break through.
Yeah, I think they're all going to get an audition, and Jim was pretty plain talking about Yabi getting more snaps. So I think that'll help. I think Derek Moore, man.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, too. That's where I'm at, too. Moore's, he's the guy, I'm sure that there's a reason. Like, I'm sure that, like, they're not seeing stuff against the run yet, or that he like just has not picked up all the little things that they can do to you at defensive end. But he's coming. That's if you wanted to like put money in on one of these guys down the road, because Yabi's he's only got 2 years to play, right? Moore is in his freshman season, so he's got at least one more season, and a little bit more runway too. The way the Michigan pass rushes, they leave one guy back. One guy is kind of like sitting in the middle and down there, especially against Tagovailoa. They wanted to make sure that they have some sort of contain. Now, I don't think that they were completely ginger, but the idea was 2 guys get to go rush the quarterback. One guy kind of pushes it closed, and then when one guy is sitting back and keeping everything kind of contained in the front, so the quarterback can't just run straight down the middle. That's their system And the problem is, if your guy who's rushing is Jalen Harrell, once in a while he does get through. He had one where he put the right tackle on his butt, and he had another one where he should use this move more often, where he aims high and then hops inside because he's more agile than the guy. He's 240 pounds, right? He's a linebacker size, and that's a linebacker style pass rush. He should do that more often and try his instead of the spin move, which is very easy to counter and very easy to see. Because if he gets stuck on a guy, he's stuck. He's not pushing the pocket. And Michigan's pass rush needs that guy to be able to push the pocket. And Upshaw he can't get to the quarterback. And they try to use him in a couple of run situations, but then he gets locked on the field just like good. When they get a first down. Like you put them under they're in the shadow of their goalpost. You're like, okay, they're going to run here. Well, they pass. Now they're at the 25. Now he's locked on the field, and you have no pass rush. So those guys have to pass them. Upshaw got as much run in this game as Braden McGregor, and I think that's got to stop. I think Braden McGregor has got to pass him because McGregor does give you some pass rush, and it's different types of pass rush. And he wasn't getting blown off the ball, and this is a good offensive line, especially at doubles. He was not getting blown off the ball this game like he was at the very beginning of the season. So if that's cleaned up a bit, now he doesn't have the strength of Upshaw, okay. But the way that they play him, I think that should be your guy. Right now, that's the one who should be leading, and then more in the future.
So real quick, give me your take, sort of your projection, your analysis, your prediction for this Maryland game. How will it play out, Brian?
Iowa game?
Iowa, sorry.
I mean, I think it'll be cagey for the first quarter or so as Michigan just tries to feel their way into a game against a high-level defense that's very tricky without having turnovers. I think, dude,
Was that like Darth Vader or something?
what just happened?
Craig was breathing into the mic.
All right,
I was breathing. Sorry.
and
I thought
so-
I had died a while ago.
And then, Michigan gets, I mean, it's just going to be the Big Ten championship game, except less scoring, probably. So,
Okay.
Seth, how do you think this will play out?
42-3. This is exactly like the Big Ten championship. It's the exact same team. They lost. They're a worse offense. And Iowa, what are they going to do? They're going to punt. They're going to put you on the 9-yard line. They want to play a special teams game against Michigan. Bring it on.
Craig
Yeah,
Ross.
that's a fair point. I mean, Michigan's special teams have been excellent, probably about as good as anybody's, and so I don't think that's a game Iowa can win. If Michigan is careful with the ball and does not turn the ball over, I can't see how they won't win this game. Iowa's, I think, middle linebacker is out for the season, which doesn't really help them a lot.
He's the Sam linebacker. He's not.
Or-
They're
Especially
two
Sam.
middle linebackers, the same guys as last year, and Jack Campbell's
Okay.
going to be great again. It's the Sam, and I mean maybe that matters because Michigan's going to be one of the few teams they face that's going to go 3 tight ends.
Mhm.
But like they have linebackers. That's the one thing you're not really worried about Iowa is their linebackers.
Yeah, well, I still like Michigan, and I think the game will be closer than last year, but I think Michigan will, as long as they're reasonably careful with the ball, it'll be fine.
All right. And from your lips, fellas, hopefully it's a game that is over in the first quarter. Hopefully. We shall see. Probably wishful thinking. But that'll do it for us here today. Be sure to join the MGoBlog Roundtable again next Thursday, mgoblog.com. You can find their breakdowns over there. And you can find us back here tomorrow on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.